My first major experience in the mental health system happened when I was in my mid-30s. I was working as an editor in a book publishing company. And in retrospect, looking back at that, just a bunch of things were going on in my life, sort of all at the same time. In terms of relationships, in terms of my family, my parents, in terms of my career, and everything just felt really heavy, and I felt really, really down. I started not being able to get up in the morning. I started calling in sick all the time to my job. I just felt more and more depressed, crying, just sort of stuck in bed. I was seeing a therapist at that time, and she was the person, I believe, who first sent me to the hospital to get checked out in the ER. And they admitted me for major depression. Over the next 4 or 5 years or so, I was hospitalized probably 5 or 6 or 7 times for depression, but every time I was hospitalized, another diagnosis was kind of added to my repertoire. So it started out with depression and ended up with depression with psychotic features, borderline personality disorder, schizoaffective, I think, at one point. And so that was sort of the period of my life when I was pathologized, diagnosed, treated like a mental health patient. I have been over my depression and have recovered for about 12 years now, 12, 13 years. When I think back to that period of my life and what helped me, the first thing I think of that was amazingly helpful for me were the other patients that I was hospitalized with. There really was a community in the hospital. I never was hospitalized for longer than 2 weeks, but because I was sort of a repeat patient in the hospital, you would run into the same people over and over again, for better or for worse. But you did form relationships with the people in the hospital, and it really was, we really looked out for each other, and it was very much a community. People really cared about each other. It was very respectful. I got most of my positive, kind of hopeful recovery message from the other patients. They put me on a whole bunch of different meds when I was in the hospital, none of which worked. And in retrospect, it's not surprising, because what I really needed to do was make changes in my life and sort of get myself out of the emotional hole I was in. But I stayed on Prozac for a long time because I was never sure whether it was helping at all or not. And weaning off it, I realized that I certainly didn't need it anymore. I also was lucky enough to find one person in the mental health field who also gave me hope. I feel incredibly lucky because I had a number of providers during those years who really gave me the message that nothing was ever going to get better, and I was always going to be a patient, and I was always going to be ill, and I was going to have to give up my hopes and dreams, and I wasn't going to be able to work in the publishing business anymore or do anything else for that matter, and very paternalistic and pathologizing. But I did meet one provider during that time who really treated me like a person and was very respectful and really encouraged me, gave me a lot of hope for the future. He ended up quitting that hospital shortly after the last time I was admitted because his boss told him that he spent way too much time with the patients and wasn't productive. I made a number of changes in my life as part of my recovery. I left publishing and ended up going back to school for a master's in mental health counseling so that I could potentially be able to support people in their recovery process, similar to the kind of support that I received that was helpful for me, and knowing that there wasn't a lot of support like that out there in the provider field. Unfortunately, my experience in getting my master's, as well as the experiences of many providers that I know well, who have become friends, you get trained out of really respecting the individual who's in the crisis, giving that person autonomy to make their own decisions about what works for them and what doesn't, allowing people to make the wrong decision and then pick themselves up and move forward, as opposed to telling them what they need to do and what they shouldn't be doing. And the training becomes very pathologizing and very paternalistic